Let's get started. Apologies to those of you who were disappointed that you weren't able to get into the first running of this workshop. Is the translation working okay? No? I'm not clear whether we have a translator. Do we have a translator? Yeah? No? It's working now. Okay, great, very good. So, yeah, I'm sorry that we just had a room that was too small to accommodate everybody. And this is not the ideal room because this is supposed to be a workshop. If you are the kind of person that hates talking to other people, please continue to sit on your own. But if you would like to have someone you can share thoughts and ideas with, then please feel free to congregate a little more closely. Some people constitutionally like to sit at the back, so I won't insist that you come closer because it's frightening sitting at the front, isn't it? Okay. So this is an opportunity hopefully to discuss with you. We have a microphone and my friend at the back, who is around there, will run around with the microphone. We need to use it because of the simultaneous translation, so please bear with me, but don't let that inhibit you from interacting. I know this is not the ideal situation for interaction, but interaction would be better than not interaction. I hadn't planned this as a lecture, more as an opportunity to think and discuss. So let me introduce what I want to talk about. Building learning power, or BLP for short, is an approach to developing young people's capacity and enthusiasm for learning, which includes thinking. But thinking and learning are not the same thing. I call it an approach because it's continually developing, and it's developing in interaction with thousands of teachers in different countries all over the world now, in little pockets of enthusiasts who like this kind of approach and who see it as providing an overall framework for bringing together things that they value in the development of their students. So this is my working definition of what building learning power is, or the aim of building learning power. And I can't get it any shorter than this because all those words are important. So the aim is to develop all students, but to do it systematically. That's to say, with a plan, consciously, coherently, across a whole school, not just a few enthusiasts who may feel like it and let everybody else carry on in the way they like to do it, and demonstrably. It's very important if you're going to be a BLP school that you are thinking about the difficult issue of how do you demonstrate that your students really are, term by term, year by year, becoming more imaginative, resilient, resourceful, better at collaborating, and so on. Because if you're not committed to that, to collecting that information, then I don't think you're serious yet about this approach. You have to be able to say, is it working? How do we know it's working? On what basis do we say that our 8th grade students are keen to persist longer with difficult, challenging tasks than they were in grade 7? You need to know. This is one of the practical challenges that schools need to engage with. To develop all students, not just high achieving, not just low achieving. This is of value to all students in school. To develop them as confident and independent learners. That's the key direction. Ready, willing, and able. Why could I not just say able to design their own learning? Why do I feel the need to have the words ready and willing in there as well?
The idea without the action.
because you need to have the skill is not sufficient. You need to have the inclination. That's why I prefer, and lots of people at this conference now prefer to talk about inclinations or dispositions or habits and not skills. The language here, as other people have been saying, is very important. So if you have developed a habit of referring to this territory by using the word skills, stop it. And train yourself to use the word habits, dispositions, character strengths, a different kind of word that connotes, that feels as if it's about the inclination, the willingness, the keenness. What we're trying to turn out is not young people who are able to be powerful learners but forget to do it. We're trying to turn out young people who are on the lookout for opportunities to be powerful learners. And what does that mean? Choosing, designing, researching, pursuing, troubleshooting, and evaluating learning for themselves. So if you're going to be a BLP teacher, you have to hold at the front of your mind, as you go into every lesson, as you plan every activity, is this activity going to stretch and strengthen their ability to do it for themselves, to manage and organize and evaluate learning for themselves? Our job as a BLP teacher is always to be conscious of the optimistic edge, the leading edge of what our students might be ready to do for themselves. Could they research that for themselves? Could they mark their maths homework for themselves, or in pairs, or in threes? What are they ready for? And when they've got used to that, now what are they ready for? This is progressively stretching and strengthening and deepening those dispositions. That's why this approach is different from some others, which say, we want our kids to be resourceful. Are you being resourceful? Yes or no? Right? But resourcefulness isn't like that. Resourcefulness grows over years, just like mathematical understanding grows and deepens over years. So you have to see yourself, if you're going to be a building learning power teacher, constantly as a coach, as a mind coach. If you're an athletics coach, you're always looking for what's the next stretch that my athlete is ready for. How can they improve their personal best at persisting or imagining or collaborating or concentrating? Our job is constantly to be putting them in the position where not just they're collaborating, they're not just talking to somebody else in the classroom, but we're making collaboration increasingly, interestingly difficult for our students, so that we are stretching that. Think about when you go to the gymnasium. You don't just get onto the bicycle and have a nice ride, as if you were going for a Sunday afternoon cycle around the country lanes. You have to get hot and sweaty and tired if you go to the gym. And so all our students should be stretching their mental muscles, not just making use of them. Very important. Evaluate learning for themselves, alone and with others. Both of those are important, in school and most importantly out of school. So I was just talking to James, and I've forgotten the name of the guy from Lakes, Mike, about if you want to be a BLP teacher, you should make sure that at the end of every lesson, becomes a habit, at the end of every lesson, you make sure there are 3 minutes preserved at the end of that lesson where you get the students to think about which mental muscle have we been stretching today? Have we been stretching our capacity to concentrate, to collaborate, to design our own learning, whatever it might be, and think of 3 different contexts outside school where I could use that muscle, where I could use that mental muscle. It becomes part of our job to be punching a hole in the membrane that separates school from real life. Because we're preparing kids for real life, not just for further study, aren't we? That's the important thing about what we're doing. So that's the point of building learning power. Why do we do it? Because we are deeply committed, deeply concerned about the fact that education is preparing kids to flourish in life and not just to get good grades. And why do we want them to do that? Because if we build youngsters, the evidence is absolutely clear. If we build youngsters who are more confident, independent, articulate and thoughtful learners, they do better on the tests. John Hattie's work has shown that, and they do better in life. Right? If you're not interested in that, then you shouldn't be a teacher in the 21st century. Go back, jump into your time machine and go back to the 19th century. If you say, I want to squeeze grades out of my children, and I don't care if in the process they become more passive, more dependent, more credulous, more willing to believe uncritically what they're told. If that's your attitude, go and be an accountant or something else. But don't spend your time with 21st century children. How do we do it? Through a succession of small, subtle, significant habit shifts by ourselves. We are gradually retraining ourselves so that we are getting better, we're constantly getting better at building these mental dispositions, these mental capacities. And there are a whole lot of different aspects to school, to the way we function as teachers, which contribute to making your classroom, if you are a teacher, an increasingly powerful incubator of these learning habits in young people. So that's the right metaphor. You're creating this culture that grows these habits, because the culture that you create invites them and demands them from students. What are we changing? We're changing the way we talk to students. We're changing the way we talk about them. We're changing the way we design the classroom, the way you lay out the furniture, the kinds of things you put on the walls, the decoration, the information that you have on the walls of your classroom. You're changing possibly the place, if you teach 6-year-olds, you're changing the place that you store the dictionaries in the classroom, so that you move them from a high shelf where the children have to ask you if they need to look up a word, to put the dictionaries on a low shelf so the children can be more resourceful. They can go and look the word up for themselves. It doesn't get more nitty-gritty than that, does it? Right? It's shifting all these little details. So we're constantly thinking, how can I arrange my room so that it invites, encourages, and even requires students to do it for themselves and not to become passive, dependent, teacher addicts of being taught. The way we design lessons is very important. What we model about learning is very important. The 19th century teacher modeled certainty and knowledgeability. She saw it as her job to create a feeling of security in the students by being able to answer everything. That is not appropriate in the 21st century. If we want young people to be powerful learners, we need to model what it means to be a powerful learner. We need to model admitting when we've made a mistake, asking when we need help, having several goes at something and not getting it right first time, being collaborative with our colleagues, don't we? It becomes your professional responsibility to be visible to your students as someone who is fallible and non-defensive about their own learning. Doesn't it? Obviously. If those are the qualities that we want in children, those are the qualities that we should strengthen and become more confident in ourselves to show the children in ourselves. It involves changing a little bit what we record and how we report on students, how we reflect students back to their parents. What kinds of things do our reports tell parents that we care about? The traditional school report, certainly in my country, endlessly recycled 4 concepts. How hard was the student trying, their effort? How able were they? How intelligent were they, their ability? How well did they score on the tests, their achievement? And did they behave well or badly? Right? We now call those the dull quartet. If we're serious about wanting our children to grow in their ability to use their imaginations appropriately, to be able to concentrate despite distractions, to be able to design their own learning, and so on, we have to use that language. We have to show that we're noticing growth and development in children. We have to reflect it back to parents so they understand that there is a new game in play in schools. The old game of learning to read and write and understand some fundamental concepts continues. We're not getting rid of that. We're not undermining the need for knowledge and understanding and literacy and numeracy, but underneath that now there is another game, the slow, continual, systematic development of mental habits. Because we know from the research that young people who lack those habits will be poorer and unhappier in their adult lives. And that's got under our skin. We now mind about that. And we're constantly looking for ways to do better at building those habits. We're increasing the amount that we involve students in designing their own learning. They become our partners in designing learning. We are thinking about the structure of the timetable. I was in a school in England the other day where the length of their lessons in school, this was a secondary school, was 35 minutes. That constraint dramatically narrows the kind of learning that can go on, doesn't it? Yeah? It means the only kind of thing you can do in that lesson is the kind of thing that can be done in 35 minutes. Expand, as in the film I showed the other day, so that all your lessons last for 2 hours. And you may remember one of the boys on that film said, our learning now happens in 2-hour blocks so we can really get into what we're learning and not just drive through the content. Right? It's a different kind of learning. Yeah? A learning that involves students in thinking and discussing and imagining and arguing and making mistakes and taking time to get things right. Because out in the big wide world, learning is like that, isn't it? In your world, as a mum or a dad or a priest or an engineer or whatever, your learning is cumulative and collaborative, isn't it? Yeah? So we need to get young people ready for what learning is like in the real world. We're helping them learn how to work together, and we're helping them learn how to take a lead in creating powerful learning contexts and situations for themselves. So what we're trying to do, for the first thing, if you're going to make progress with this, is to have a very clear vocabulary for talking about what these learning capacities are. And that vocabulary has to be accessible and appealing to your students, however old they are, to their parents, and to all the teachers in your school. Don't dress it up with long words. Make sure that the children understand what you're up to. because their buy-in to this is absolutely important. You can't train an athlete for the Olympics if they don't want to be trained, can you? You can't train young people to be elite learners, to be Olympic-level learners, if they don't understand and buy in to the process. So we have to use language that involves them, that they can understand. So here's an attempt, right? Could you easily translate all of these things into Spanish? They're fairly practical, or into Norwegian, or wherever you come from, right? So this is the children speaking. What we're doing in school is stretching and strengthening these dispositions, the dispositions to ask our own questions, to have faith, to have confidence, to have trust in our own curiosity. How do you do that day by day? What small changes do you need to make in your classroom so that when the children walk into your classroom in the morning, that room is visibly, tangibly inviting of their own questioning, their own curiosity? What could you do differently? Just 1 minute with your neighbor. If you were to change one small thing in your classroom or your home, or what you have on your fridge in your kitchen at home, or in your staff room, so that room invited children's curiosity more, what would it be? Even better if you can think of 3 things. Have a chat with your neighbor. Okay, thank you very much. If you've just had the germ of a good idea, write it down and make sure that you do it in September or the next time that you meet your students. Don't lose it. Yeah? Capture it. If you're a mum or a dad, when your children come home from school in the afternoon, what do you say to them? What's your habit? Were you a good boy today? What did you learn today? Try saying to them, did you ask a good question today? Could you do that? Right? Anybody could do that, couldn't they? Right? It's just, you see, you can hear one little ingredient of their lives moving by 5 degrees, just changing slightly, so that they become interested in their ability to ask good questions. To research independently. Some of you will have come across the research of a man called Sugata Mitra. Have you heard of him? Yeah, quite a lot of you have heard of him. He's shown in very well conducted experiments that groups of quite young children, 4 children to a group, with an internet-enabled computer screen and terminal, doesn't have to be very sophisticated, can teach themselves almost anything. How about that? Groups of 7-year-olds, 4 7-year-olds with a rich question, a really interesting question, 45 minutes, gathered round a computer. They have to be more children than computers, because the essence of this is in the talk, the discussion, the arguing, right? And at the end of those 45 minutes, they will have learnt a huge amount. Right? More than if you talked to them for 45 minutes. Right? Or made them sit quietly reading a textbook for 45 minutes. Are we teaching them to check what they've been told? Do we encourage them to put their hands up and say, how do we know that that's true, miss? How could we check that? Who's trying to tell me this? Would it be appropriate to start doing that, encouraging the children to have a more gently critical, skeptical attitude towards what they read? Could you start doing that when they're 6 years old? Who teaches 6-year-olds? Anybody? Could you do that with 6-year-olds? Is it possible? Yeah? You could certainly do it with 12-year-olds, couldn't you? Could you do it with 4-year-olds? You think? So, the earlier we start, the better, right? Because we're building up these muscles for life, aren't we? Are we teaching them to think on their feet? In other words, to be able, when something happens that is surprising or shocking or disappointing or disruptive, how do we want them to behave? I'll tell you how I want them to behave. I want them to be able to go, wow, and then bounce right back and start to be interested. Wouldn't you? Start to be engaged in that question, not to go to pieces. What's Spanish for go to pieces? Yeah, not to fall apart, not to become helpless. Sorry? Yeah, exactly. To become upset or insecure or something. Yeah, we want them to be able to bounce back. Are you training that? Do you give them lovely little surprises every now and again, or often? How many a day do you shock them a little bit so they're getting used to having to cope with something that occurred that they didn't expect? Because sure as hell, their life's going to do that to them, isn't it? Isn't it? Maybe not in Bilbao, I don't know. Right, not in Spain. Nobody ever gets shocked or disappointed in Spain, right? Yeah? So if that's the demand of life, if that's a learning demand for life, are we preparing them in school? This is just simple common sense, isn't it? If school is a preparation for life, we need to have a look carefully at what life is like and get them ready for it. I can't believe I just said that. It's so obvious. But it didn't happen to me in my school. What about getting them to design their own learning? How much of the time in your school, in your lessons, do you say to the children, I want you to practice multiplying 2 numbers together for the next half hour? But before you do that, I want you to talk to your buddy about what would be a really good way of stretching your multiplication muscles. Could you involve them in designing that activity for themselves? Could you? If your intuitive answer is no, I don't think my students could do that, then my question to you is, by when are you going to have helped them learn to do it? Right? What's the coaching journey that will help them build up their ability to take that responsibility and to take it joyfully, to take it happily, because it's more interesting, isn't it? If you're involved in helping to think about the process. Our kids love it. Once they get a taste for it in school, be careful, beware. They won't go back into the box. They say, no, get it. Have you had little children who you say, what are you doing, sweetheart? Let me help you. And they say, no, go away. I want to do it for myself. Don't they? Yeah? We over-teach. We over-rescue. We over-design in schools. And thereby keep children with weak learning muscles. We deprive them of opportunities to stretch and strengthen those muscles. Is this not just basic common sense? Is it? You've had a few glasses of wine, haven't you? So try and stay with it.
Wine here is invigorating.
Oh, is it? Okay. Very good. It's a special Spanish wine, is it? Okay. Very good. Do you teach them to be bold and to try new things? Because I'll tell you what, there's a lot of high-achieving students in English schools who are very, very timid, very, very unadventurous in their approach to learning. Do you have those kids in Spain? Bright but brittle, we call them. What's a good Spanish word for brittle? They break easily. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Good. Do you show them how to help themselves when they're stuck, rather than becoming dependent upon you to rescue them when they get into difficulty? How would you do that? There's a little routine that lots of teachers use. Many of you will know it and use it already. It's called try 3 before me. Any of you know this one? Yeah? Some of you use that already. Very simple, basic. You can use it with 4-year-olds. What it means is when a child has become stuck, they don't know how to proceed with what they're doing, they can put their hand up and you will go and help them. But when you go to help them, your first question is, if I'm going to help you, you have to tell me 3 things that you tried to help yourself. So the culture in the classroom becomes one of the children do everything they can to try and unstick themselves, because that's cool. That's more cool. It works, doesn't it? Yeah? And you could do it with 12-year-olds or 16-year-olds as well. It doesn't matter. It's not only for little children. Is this practical enough for you? Yeah? Okay. To plan and anticipate their learning journey. Do you give them time to do that? You say, here's an activity. Here's something that I want you to do for homework. Here's a small project. But before you start, spend 10 minutes in your team or in your group. Just anticipate what resources are you going to need, where might be the roadblocks or the pitfalls. How are you going to, what might get in the way, what might upset your learning? How could you prepare for that? How long do you think it's going to take? How much time do you anticipate this project will take? Do you know the research shows that if you do that with children, they're more likely to hand in their work on time and it's better quality? That's worth knowing, isn't it? Right? All these different aspects of things we could do. How much do you involve them in checking and improving their own work? Do you always get them, when they've done some writing, to work with a partner to critique and improve each other's work? So there's always 2 or 3 drafts before they hand something in. When they're doing something on a computer, do you insist that they track changes so that they can see the process? They can be interested in the evolution of quality. That's a good phrase, isn't it? The evolution of quality. Do they have a feel for that? That quality is something that comes through repeated thinking and effort until you finally produce something that you're deeply proud of. Have any of you watched a little video clip called Austin's Butterfly? Yeah? If you haven't watched Austin's Butterfly, watch it. If you have, put your hand up if you've seen Austin's Butterfly. Keep your hand up if your teaching has routinely changed as a result of watching that video. Yeah? Good. If not, why not? If you watched it and liked it, do something about it. Design things that give children an opportunity to have several goes, to critique, to improve, to reflect, to imagine, to cope with frustration, and then to come out at the end with something that they are deeply proud of, even if they're 6 years old and it's only copying a butterfly. Because that attitude, the attitude of craftsmanship, Ron Berger calls it, he's a Project Zero affiliate, that attitude, that sense of pleasure in producing something of quality is absolutely what you want in the plumber who comes to fix your toilet, don't you? The electrician who comes to deal with the electrical fault in your house, the journalist who writes for your local newspaper, let alone the neurosurgeon who deals with your blood clot. It's a foundation of a life of satisfaction, is the discovery that satisfaction occurs at the end of a journey that involves drafting and repeating and improving and reflecting. You don't get that quality of satisfaction any other way, do you? Every young person should be helped to discover that. That would change the world. Are we stretching their ability to seek and make good use of feedback, to work well in different kinds of groups, to listen carefully to each other? Do you train your kids in listening? Yeah? Do you run little listening workshops for them? You might do it when they're 5 years old. Do you do it if they need it when they're 16 or 18 years old? Why not? We have lots of slogans in Building Learning Power. One of the ones that keeps cropping up is, if you want it, coach it. You say, they can't do it now, they don't do it now, but at the end of 6 weeks, I want them to be willing and able and ready to do it. So what do I need to do to get them there? In the old days, teachers would shrug their shoulders and say, well, what can you do with kids from San Sebastian? They're just like that. Right? That's pathetic. It's a cop-out. Everybody's brains are made up of habits. And if we want to, we can help them grow better habits. Yeah? So, this is our basic understanding. We call that an expansive school or a Building Learning Power school. As opposed to, I don't want to spend time on this, when I was at school, the mental training I got was this lot. Right? Lesson after lesson, maths lesson, English lesson, science lesson, history lesson, geography lesson. These were the mental habits that I was developing. The ability to retain information in a relatively undigested form. The ability to discuss ideas in a fairly superficial way. The ability to justify what I thought, that's useful. The ability to perform accurate calculations, not to think about what I was doing, but to get right answers. To solve well-formed problems, not messy, complicated, I don't know where to begin problems. They were all neatened up for me. They were what David Perkins, in one of his earlier books, called tame topics. What happened to wild topics in school? Wild topics where there are jungles and snakes and no well-marked paths. Do we give kids the opportunity? Because they're going to need it, aren't they? Aren't they? In life? Life is jungly. Yeah? To produce small essays, to accept criticism, to achieve targets from other people. That's not a good preparation for life in the 21st century. This is. So you can preserve some of that, but each day you're looking, how can I add more of this? How can I adjust what I'm doing so I'm doing more of that stuff? Now, here come some more practical things. And in your heads, particularly after a couple of glasses of wine, you may have these 3 baskets. I have them in my head. So I want you to be aware as I tell you things. I've already told you 8 small little things that you could do. And they went into, when I said them, they went into one of those 3 baskets. The first basket is called obvious, trivial, common sense. Everybody does that anyway. Don't waste my time, mister. Right? The third basket is called impossible. Totally out of the question. Might work in California, sunshine, but not here, not in my school, not in my culture. Right? The important thing is that some of the things you put in that basket would be not impossible, but not yet. Impossible now. Right? So be careful about that one. But the most important basket is the middle one. And the middle basket is the basket of possibility. Maybe, oh, I could do that. Oh, that's a really neat idea. That's really interesting. I'm going to try that the next time I'm with my kids. Or, I like the sound of it, but I'm not sure how that would work with bright 17-year-olds. It sounded a bit primary school to me. I'm going to have to go away and think about how to adjust it or change it so that it's appropriate to the age or the subject that I teach. Right? That's still middle basket. It's like you're going to go away and worry about it to create your own version. So all the things that I'm telling you, I want you to be aware which basket they're going to go into. Because this conference will have been a waste of time if you forgot to bring your middle baskets, won't it? Yeah? If you go away at the end of this week having had a conference which is inspiring and stimulating and challenging and intriguing, and you don't do anything different when you go back to school, it's been an expensive waste of time, hasn't it? Yeah? So I want you to keep scribbling. Keep looking for things that are going to go into your middle baskets. Because this is your last chance. This is the last afternoon, right? But you already have middle baskets that are full of stuff anyway, don't you? Yeah? From the last few days. Good. So I showed you this the other day. If you want to help kids become more curious, put up a big wall where they put all their questions up. When they come into school after the holidays, the way you greet them is you say, who's got a good question? Let's all put our questions. And they primed when they went away for the holidays. They were excited because they were going to be finding new questions. And they were pleased to bring you back a lovely, juicy, meaty, tricky question that they can put on the wonder wall. And the thing is, you don't have to answer them. Right? You don't have to be the know-all. Because the point is the visual celebration of their curiosity. It's about the questions, not about the answers. If you want them to become more adventurous, use a riskometer. This is a riskometer. It's like a thermometer, but it measures the degree of difficulty of the task that children have undertaken. And one way you can use this is by getting the children to tell you, have a conversation with them about how did they feel or what might they say at different points on the scale. So, for example, if they're doing something right up the top here, I've just copied these out because you can't read these very well. One child wrote, "This was a few steps too hard. Next time I'll choose a more manageable task." In other words, I thought I might be able to cope with this, but I need to bring it down a little bit, the task that I'm going to do. If it's down the bottom, it's boring. I did well in most things, but it was a little bit too easy, and next time I'll try something harder. Otherwise, what's the point? Because learning happens in that sweet spot, which is in between boredom and anxiety. Csikszentmihalyi calls it, doesn't it? Learning happens when you're getting a nice, interesting, absorbing challenge out of what you're doing, where you're being stretched but not strained. Yeah? Now, in your classroom, who knows best where that sweet spot is? The children, obviously. It changes day to day, hour to hour, moment to moment. So are you using a tool like this to help them become more perceptive about whether they're in the sweet spot or not? People use traffic lights. Green, it's too easy. Red, I'm really out of my depth. Amber, do you have amber in Spanish traffic lights? Amber, it's like, it's in the middle. I'm great. And when you ask the children to show you their traffic light, you want most of them to be in amber, right? In the orange zone, in the middle. If they're all in green, you've pitched the level of the activity wrong. You say, I'm terribly sorry, I designed something that was too easy for you. Let's see how we could make it a bit more interesting. Don't you? Ban erasers from the classroom. In some classrooms, just check whether there's any remains of this idea in your school. There's an idea that if you're a good student, particularly if you're a bright student, or if you're gifted and talented, that's the English expression, then the way you know that someone is gifted and talented is because they get things right, first time, always, without too much effort. Right? That used to be, we used to interpret that as being high ability. I interpret that as you're not setting them difficult enough stuff. Right? They're wasting their time. They're spinning their wheels. Do you have kids in your classroom who like to, they often bright little girls, they love to sit at the front, and every time you ask them a question, hand goes up and a smug little smile. Right? They're wasting their time. Everybody should be sweating in your classroom because it's not a classroom, it's a mind gym. It's a gymnasium for the mind. The point of them being there is to be stretched, not to turn out easy answers. It's a deeply obvious mistake, but it's deeply damaging to young people, particularly to the high achievers. Because if you're a bright little girl or a bright little boy, when eventually you get to the University of Madrid or Oxford or Cambridge or the University of Sydney, if you've got there and you haven't been helped to develop resilience and independence and resourcefulness, you're in for a rude shock. You're going to have a tough time, even though you got top marks, because you won't have developed what you now need. And what you will now need is independence and resilience, the ability to plan and organize and evaluate and pursue and troubleshoot learning for yourselves. You may have turned out the top scholar of the year, but you will have been miseducated, diseducated, if you haven't developed those qualities, if you haven't been helped to develop those qualities. So the erasers can contribute to that attitude, the attitude of pretending that I got it right first time. Never rub anything out. Always put a line through it, or preferably highlight it. Have a big poster in your classroom saying, mistakes are our friends. Get a small one made, a fridge magnet, and get all your children to take it home to their parents and stick it on the fridge in the kitchen. Mistakes are our friends. Right? Simple. Anybody could do that. Get the children to create a list of ideas about what they could do when they're stuck. Simple. But get them to keep thinking about how to improve it, how to deepen it, how to customize it. Things you could do when you can't read a word. Things you could do when you can't get your equation to balance. Things you could do when you can't get the hang of a forward roll or a tumble turn in the swimming pool. Things you could do when to help yourself recharge, reboot your own learning. Useful? Put it up on the wall. Talk about it. Get the children to generate their own ideas. Make sure that the iconography of your school emphasizes learning rather than achievement. The process of learning. Make the innards of learning. What's a good Spanish word for innards? It's like what your guts inside you. Intestinas or something. Yeah, is that a good word? Right?
Yeah.
So the intestines of learning. What's learning? Aprender or something. Intestinas dos aprender or something like that, right? You want the children to get interested in what it feels like, what the private emotions are of being a learner, so that they're not frightened of them. Right? They get used to them. Michael Jordan, I can accept failure, but I can't accept not trying. You have some children in your school who protect themselves from failure by withdrawing their effort. Don't you? Yeah? They can say, well, I could have. But bothered, it was just boring. Why they say that is because if they tried and failed, they would feel bad about their ability. So if you don't try, you don't have to feel bad about your ability, because you're protected this image of yourself as potentially bright. Did that make sense to you? Yeah? So anybody could do that. I like this from Serena Williams. I look on losing not as failure, but as research. You have to say that with a snarl. So look out, baby. Look out, Sharapova. I'm coming for you. You may have beaten me once or twice in the past, but I only just get better when I lose. Do your kids have that attitude in a maths lesson? You can have it if you want it. You can coach it. You can develop it as you go along. Getting them interested in works in progress. Aren't these pictures gorgeous? Aren't they? Don't they invite your inquisitiveness? Unfinished works of art, right? This is a J.M.W. Turner unfinished piece, pregnant with possibility. Wouldn't it be interesting to get the children with this picture or that picture or their own half-finished pieces of art and think about how could we improve it? What could this become? What are the possibilities here? Feeds imagination. In one of our schools, the children curated an exhibition, an art exhibition, in the foyer of the school. These were the T-shirts. This is what the exhibition was called. I never finish anything. Is that a nice idea? Which basket did that go into? Keep checking your baskets, right? Because it's about, isn't it? That's what it's about. Talk about their heroes in terms of their learning qualities. Get the children to think about what this is, all the children's ideas about what kind of a learner Shrek is. Is he brave? Is he adventurous? Is he curious? Can he bounce back from disappointment? What about Finding Nemo? What about The Matrix? What about whatever they might be interested in at the time? Get the children to be their own learning heroes. This is Maria, little Maria. She's got her picture up. Here she is in her super learning hero uniform. I am a learning superhero because I am good at persevering and reciprocity. Reciprocity is a fancy word for the social side of learning. I can collaborate with other people and I work hard when it's challenging. And if you ask Maria, she'll tell you, what's the next step for me in becoming even better as a perseverer, even better as a collaborator? If you want children to develop their ability to concentrate, concentration is a muscle. It grows with exercise. Buddhists know that. It grows with practice. The ability to stay focused on an object of attention and resist the distraction of the rumbling in your tummy telling you that it's lunchtime, and the noise of the rubbish cart outside the window, and the ping from your phone that tells you that a text has just arrived. Right? You can strengthen the muscle that says all of those things are going on, and I'm going to persist until 1 o'clock. I've got another 10 minutes to go, and I'm going to stick with it. Right? It's a muscle. We can train it. So here is a boy with a very weak concentration muscle. And his teacher decided that she was going to try and help him strengthen it. He's called Lamar. And so what she said was, Lamar, I'd like you to play a game with me. This is the game. I'm going to draw a line across the top of your page. And one end of this line is undistracted, absorbed, totally on task, completely concentrated. And the other end is distracted, daydreaming, wandering off, messing about. She said, the game is, what I want you to do is every 2 minutes, put a little mark on that line to indicate at that instant, where are you on that spectrum? That lesson, Lamar wrote 9 lines. In terms of his history, that's the equivalent to Lamar writing War and Peace, or Don Quixote, or Shakespeare's sonnets. Right? Now, just turn to your partner and say, why do you think that little game might have had that beneficial effect for Lamar? Just have a chat. Why? Why do you think it worked? Okay, thank you very much. Because I'm running out of time, I'm going to tell you what I think you might have said. It helped him develop more self-awareness. He became more conscious of his own distractibility. He liked it because he was involved in being part of the solution rather than being treated as the problem. He enjoyed it because it was a game, it was a little challenge. He was trying to see if he could move his mark closer to the focused end and away from the undistracted end. Did you say things like that? Yeah? Is it worth a try? Yeah? It's not, I can't guarantee this, but it's worth a try, isn't it? Yeah? Do you have Lamar in your classroom? Yeah? You familiar with Lamar? Then don't forget that when you're marking Lamar's little essay, you say something about the essay, and then you don't forget to say, you've worked well at ignoring distractions today as well. Good boy. Right? You're a mind coach. So you don't forget to comment on the bit of mind training that's gone on. Well done, Lamar. That was a great training session. Yes, you may have written an interesting story, but you've also put in some effort to help you strengthen your concentrating muscle. Lamar liked this so much that the next time they were doing a bit of writing, his teacher noticed to her amusement that Lamar has drawn his own line at the top of his piece of paper, has labelled it and is putting his own little marks on it. You should also notice that Lamar couldn't resist writing, "distracted by Jordan." It's important to name and shame the distractor, isn't it? Okay. When you're designing activities, design them with a learning muscle stretch in mind. So I'm going to get my 14-year-olds to write about some event in the Spanish Civil War or in the Tudor court or in the early settlers in Australia or in the Battle of Gallipoli or wherever, through the eyes of 3 different people who had different roles in those events. Any New Zealanders here? The Treaty of Waitangi is a good case in point for this. Right? So they're not just learning about history, they're learning to stretch their empathy muscles. You're using that history topic as an exercise machine to help them stretch their capacity to put themselves in other people's shoes. Could you do that? It's not just good teaching. You're not doing that in order to seduce your students into greater engagement. You're doing it because it's a really useful mental habit to help them develop. And it's a contribution to world peace. If more young people were willing to withhold judgment until they had, as to the best of their ability, understood what it was like to be a jihadist or the Greek Prime Minister or whoever, we would have a happier world. Wouldn't we? Yeah? So this is a teacher who has not forgotten those bigger goals in the middle of an otherwise ordinary history lesson. Anybody could do that, couldn't they? Right? But it requires awareness and commitment by us to make it happen. Make sure that you just change the way you write reports a little bit. I've mentioned this before. So that you're practicing using the language of the mental muscles. What would your students' parents think if they were getting reports that contained more of this kind of information? Would they like it or not? Would they understand it? Would they see the point? Would they think that you, as a school, you'd gone completely barking mad? Of course, you also give them information about target grades and literacy and numeracy and predicted scores. You don't have to withdraw all that, right? This is adding another layer, another very important layer. I've already talked about being a model, so we won't say any more about that. And I haven't got enough time to talk about all the different little ways in which you could gather evidence of whether you're being successful. This is a year 3 classroom, 7-year-old children who self-evaluate every 2 weeks in how good they've been at managing distractions over the previous fortnight. They give themselves a little score. They put their post-it note in one of 5 different grades. And then when you go to that school, the head teacher can show you the graph on her computer of how the year 4 concentration muscles are improving over time. She can gather that information and show you. It's not that difficult. You could easily do that. This is another school that just is interested in finding out whether what they're doing is having an effect. So this is using a stuck poster in a primary school. Before the children were using the stuck poster, she got a baseline of what the children did when they were facing a challenge in their learning. Did they ask an adult? Did they go and look for a resource independently? Did they work it out with a friend? Did they do it just on their own? Right? This was what was going on in the classroom beforehand. After a few weeks, I think it was 6 weeks, of working with the stuck poster, she did it again, right? Look at the difference, right? Big change in the level of dependency of the students in that classroom. Much more are they likely to go and find a resource that will help them sort it out for themselves. It works. It makes a difference. It's encouraging and reassuring for those teachers to see that this is having a practical effect, isn't it? Yeah? And it helps them check. They say, now, great, that's good, that worked. Now what else? Now where can we go with this? Won't bother to tell you about that. This is a high-achieving school in Scotland called Gordonston that have got a big jump in their A-level results, that's 18 years old, exams, as a result of treating their children more independently. And I've got some quotes from there. And the other thing you can do is in order to support the modelling, if you're a school leader, try and build that culture of the staff as a powerful learning community itself. Encourage the development of that as they go along. There's lots of resources. If you want to get more ideas, I've just given you a tiny little example. Hands up if you've got anything in your middle basket. People who sit nearer the front are more likely to have brought their middle baskets. Maybe that's not so surprising. But so there's lots of books, lots of resources you can get, lots of networks that you can join of other people who just love sharing practical little things like this. I'm around till the end of the afternoon, so if you have any really cute ideas, things that you're doing in your school that I haven't mentioned, come and tell them to me. And the next time I go to a conference, I'll tell the world about them too. That's how I make my living. I steal things from people like you. Thank you very much.